Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time you're watching this. And welcome to another episode of the Buddhist Biohacker. My name is Lisa Gunshore. I am your host as always, and I'm really excited about today. Barrie has been on before, and she has an incredible book that I am still moving through because there's a lot of self-inquiry and I love it so much. And I just want to welcome you back, Barrie. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's so good. Your book is really so incredible. And, I'll make sure everybody we get it in the show notes, but I think I've only gotten through the first 2 chapters because of the self-inquiry piece. There's a lot you have to ask yourself and really look at, which I love. So for those of you, and I think most of our community loves this, like if you love doing inner work, I think it's a really good place to be, and actually a really good space. I think it's really good if you've never done yoga before, actually, because the things that your book is asking you to think about really could help a new practitioner create a yoga practice instead of an exercise practice, like right out of the gate. So I really love it. And for everybody who's watching on the live, you can use the chat box to your right to ask questions, share comments and stories. We love that. And if you're listening later on iTunes, we got on iHeartRadio this week. So exciting. We also just got a notification last night that we are on the Alexa platform as well. So you should be able to ask your Alexa by the end of the day, today or tomorrow, to play us too. iTunes, Podbean, Spotify. We're waiting to hear back from Pandora, so hopefully that comes soon. But anyways, wherever you're listening, you can also share your comments and questions and connect with us on MeWe at the Buddhist Biohacker Forum. And Barrie, you're on MeWe, right? You're on there, I think. Yeah, so we're all on there, so you guys can continue this conversation on there and just continue to build our community. So enough of all of that. But our focus today is on renewal. And you know what, Barrie, yesterday I canceled my whole day. It was like a really weird, I just felt really tired. That's the truth. We had a death in the family. My uncle passed away last week. It's been really hard on my dad. And, so the weekend was tough, really being there for my dad and with my own work as a medium, just trying to work through like the energy of my uncle's crossing and all of these things. And so yesterday I just canceled everything. I went for a walk. I sat, I put my feet on the earth and I put my hands on a tree trunk I was sitting on and just really rested all day. And so this is like the perfect show today to talk about renewal, because I feel like that wasn't enough for me yesterday. And I'm excited to talk about it. So where do you want to start with all of it? What are your...
Well, I just want to affirm your experience of feeling tired. Well, you didn't say tired, but I'm guessing just tired. Like you had to stop, you had to rest, you had to do something to restore yourself. And I want to say that I think that's certainly an experience I've been having, especially over the past few months. And I think it's an experience we've all been having, even if our lives are relatively stable, even if we're fortunate enough to live in a place where we feel healthy and we have space to move. And, if we enjoy those privileges, I think that there is a collective heaviness right now. We're all feeling each other. We know that we're all connected. So we feel the suffering of the world. We feel that, even if it's not on a conscious level. That's my thought. I mean, this is anecdotal. Yeah. I don't have proof of that, but that's what I'm hearing from the students and teachers that I work with, that just because of what we're going through collectively, our stamina is not our energy is not as reliable as it used to be. Our stamina is not as strong. It's not, we get tired more easily. We have to take breaks. And so I just want to affirm that I think you're not alone. And if anyone watching this is feeling that they just need to take breaks, it is a time to prioritize, I think, the what I consider reliable renewal strategies that we have. And you mentioned you went out into nature and you put your feet on the earth and you sat on a tree trunk. That's a great example of a couple of things actually that might be reliable renewal strategies that I think we all need to know what we can do to restore ourselves when we need it. And being in nature is certainly at the top of my list, is at the top of the list of many people I've spoken to. So that's one thing, right? That we just know it may not be all we need, but it's certainly something that we can do. And, we got the idea for this topic from my book, which you mentioned, which I have right here. So it's
Yay.
Here it is, Evolving Your Yoga. And the book came out last year, so before any of this happened. But the book is really about strategies to use your practice for self-development, to use your yoga practice as really part of your journey of personal development. And one of the principles that I have is to renew yourself. So I've always thought that we've needed that for a lot of different reasons, but now certainly more than ever. So I do think those reliable renewal strategies, like I have my list of things I can do when I need them. And I think we all need that right now.
Yeah, I love this reliable renewal strategies idea. I wrote that down. I was like, that's good. How did you come up with your list? Like, what can we all do to come up with our own lists? Like, how did you figure out what those things were for you?
It was through the way I figured out, it was really through necessity that I figured out what I needed. When I was feeling tired at the end of the day, I just started to ask myself, what can I do? And it really started with needing to be alone, needing to be in silence. I noticed that right from the beginning of the confinement period, that it was really paramount for me to, as best I could, it's not always possible, but as best I could, make time and space each day where I could just be in silence and solitude. And it felt I've always needed that, but it felt more than ever. There was a sense internally that it was really, really important. Mm-hmm. And that was when I think I started thinking about this. It's like, what are the things? I mean, I sort of knew we were facing this period of confinement. We didn't know how long it was going to last. And I thought, okay, what are the things that I can do to keep myself in balance?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I think for me, and I think for you and probably for most everybody in our community, like when you're a spiritual being and likely have some kind of spiritual practice, being alone is actually like nice. But there's an interesting energy when it's like forced, that forced. And so it's like coming into a place of acceptance of it and sitting with it and being quiet. And this is making me think, do you think, let's see, the context of this is that I had this realization in the last couple of weeks that I did many things as a kid naturally that I needed. And I'm starting to look back at that and say, oh, I need to do this again. Like, I used to go ride my bike like every day as a kid and sit with my feet in the water. I lived by a lake, and put my feet in the water and write in my journal. Like, that was something I did as a kid, like just inherently, that was what I loved to do. And I was by myself. I didn't, just went and did those things. And so it's like, oh, how do I get that? And I'm just curious if you've ever noticed anything like that. Like, if there are things that have stayed true through your life, or things when you were young that were the part of your renewal that you're talking about, that are like things you've brought back or things you've reconnected with. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And certainly riding my bicycle was something that I did naturally all the time as a child, that I still do today. Mm-hmm. Taking walks, just taking long walks. And I think it's true that in children, there's that innate drive, right, to doing what feels pleasurable, to doing what feels good, to doing what nourishes us.
Yeah.
That could be a way, that could be something to go back to. You know, one of the things, one of the frameworks that I've been using to inquire and think about this time is the framework of deep adaptation, which is it's a framework. It was actually developed by a UK scientist named Jem Bendell, and it was originally addressed toward thinking about climate change and how we can recreate how we live. And there's 3 steps to it. And the first is relinquishment. It's but it can be, even though it was designed to be used on a more cultural or society level, it can also be used on an individual level. And the first step in it is relinquishment. What do I need to let go of? And the second step is resilience. I might not be saying it in the right order, but resilience is the second piece. What do I want to maintain?
Okay.
And then the third element is restoration. What do I want to bring back? Right? So we can think of that again on a cultural level, but we can also think about it on an individual level. And I think many people have been just organically thinking of this time in that way, thinking of those elements. But when you said you went back to thinking of what you did as a child, I thought of that piece of restoration. And I think that's a great question. You know, what can we bring back from our earlier lives that really served us, that might serve us again? What do we want to bring back into our lives? What habits? What ways of being? What activities?
Oh, I love that so much. That's like a really good process to go through, and even just family dinner time, like without the extracurricular, you know, I have 4 stepkids. So when the extracurricular went away, it was like, oh, we all can sit and have dinner together, and we're not driving one person somewhere and somebody someplace else. Like there's that energy when you think about like what to bring back. And that's another thing, you know, that we can bring back that's can actually be, you know, really restorative and feel really good.
Yeah, and it might be an opportunity of this time because we're being forced on so many levels to shed things that we've ways of being that we've come to know, right? It's a time of such transformation that we're being forced into. But thinking about it that way kind of gives me a little bit of freedom. It gives me the freedom to think about it as, oh, an opportunity. And it's empowering, I think, to think of it that way. And like you said, like family dinner is a perfect example, right? Of something that really might serve all of us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It is empowering because it's like in the end, we create our life. And so by choosing what we're creating and saying it out loud, I've had some really beautiful awareness shifts myself through the last couple of weeks of, you know, choosing to do something rather than viewing it as a forced action. You know, I'm choosing to do this thing, whatever it is. And you know, just that reminder that we have, you know, our divine authority within ourselves, and we can make these choices to have these experiences that are, you know, restorative or renewing. And it's interesting because if we think about it, this conversation is happening like in this really midpoint of this year and really midpoint of this global event that we've been going through this year. And so what I want to know is, as a yoga instructor and, you know, a teacher and all of these things that make you, now that we're halfway through the year, like what is the biggest piece of your renewal process for you right now? Like if we were to pulse check right now, like what's your most important renewal exercise or space, or I don't know, whatever that means, whatever I'm trying to say.
Sure. Strategy.
Yeah, thank you.
I would have to say I mean, all the practices that I do for sure, which for me, it's asana practice, meditation. But I think one of the most powerful parts of it for me is being in nature,
Mm.
because I'm fortunate to live in a place where I live in the country, so there's lots of nature around. That's one thing. But also I find what I'm really needing now are ways to just get back to a sense of what doesn't change, a sense of what will continue and what
Mhm.
feels stable within myself, a kind of anchoring. That's an image that's come to me a lot. Like, how do we not just anchor in the present moment, but really um, get energy out of our minds and down, literally down,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Into our breath, into our belly, into our physicality. And for me, walking is huge. Like, I take long walks almost every day. And um, during those times, for me, it's a practice, because I'm able to connect with that energy, right? That energy of unchanging being, right? The energy of life that is still flourishing and continuing amidst everything that's going on. So that's what's really centering and anchoring for me right now.
Oh, I love that. I might sneeze. I'm sorry if I do.
That's okay.
Yeah, for me too, the nature's important. And uh, I'm lucky that I live right by the Rocky Mountains. So as much as we can get up there, we've been trying to get up into the mountains and onto a nature trail. And just I was reminded by the collective the spirit team that I work with, um, that we get our news from the planet. And I just love that, because that's that's when you connect in really to the planet and the Schumann resonance and the energy and the vibration. Like, it tells you everything that's happening really in this
Mhm.
in this peaceful way, in this very maternal, nurturing way. How do you bring?
Well,
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I also think, as you were saying that, what came up for me is that I also find so not just inspiration, but lessons in nature. I feel like every element of nature holds wisdom
Mm,
if we're looking for it. And so the and the beauty of nature, there's just so much inspiration and upliftment we can get from the natural world, that I think that elemental quality, right? It's not intellectual, even though we can interpret, we can think about it, we can contemplate it, we can use our mind to extract the lessons, but there's something on another level, I think, of that it communicates to us, that is very heartening and necessary for us right now.
I love that. How do you bring that into your classes right now? Like, how do you bring renewal into your classes and nature when we're all electronic right now for the most part?
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's, well, one thing is I've been encouraging people that, in addition to doing live Zoom classes, to have your own practice where you're not dependent on technology, or maybe you're just listening to someone guide you, but you're not dependent on the screen for interaction. I think Zoom classes are great because you get to connect with your teacher, you get to connect with other people, and there's a lot of value in that.
Mhm.
Additionally, though, I think one of the real opportunities for people to use yoga right now, as a practice of renewal, is just by giving ourselves space to be with ourselves in whatever way that is. And so I've heard of people really, in the move to online yoga, they're actually feeling a great freedom, because they don't, when you're not in a class with other people, you're not looking around, you're not comparing yourself, there's a real freedom to make your practice work for you and have it be whatever you need it to be. which sometimes might be, just lying down on your back, rolling around, for a little while. One thing that helps me is to have a consistent way to begin my practice, and just kind of getting just a way to check in and get in touch with my body and what is needed for the day, because we all have different tendencies of what the practice will tend to want to do. Might not always be the same as the practice we need to do. What is renewing and restorative for one person is not for another. So there's times when definitely practice needs to be restful, but there's times when a more energizing practice, something that kind of gets your heart pumping, can actually be more restorative in a certain way, depending, right? So it's a very individual. So I always like to give myself space at the beginning of practice to, as best I can, get clear on what's needed today, like what can serve me in the best way. And so that's one thing. Another point about renewal in yoga is, for me, the idea of always beginning again. Always. And actually, this is a practice that I've been doing as the days have gone by. At the end of the day, consciously releasing and offering my day and letting go, so that the next day feels like a new beginning. And that's just a conscious, nothing really on the outside has changed, but it's a conscious shift I make that allows me to feel renewed.
Yeah.
It's just that little it takes just a couple of minutes before I go to bed of just releasing everything from the day, offering it. And then in the morning, really having, during the little morning routine I have, to really consciously reset and begin again. And that's something that, of course, yoga teaches us, that every time we're on our mat, it's a new beginning. We might have done downward facing dog thousands of times, but if we're present, if we're paying attention, our body's different every day. The experience of the pose is different every day. So I like to go back to basics a lot. I work with my feet and my legs a lot. That's another point about, the renewal that comes through grounding and anchoring, I think, is really real. And so working your feet, working your legs, in addition to, walk, hike, cycle, climb, all of that is great. But also have a way to work your legs in such a way, and feet, that energy can move down. And so that is also like very renewing for me in terms of physically. So all those things, and again, it's different every time if we pay attention to it. So that idea of being able to begin again, I think, is really applicable to all parts of our lives, especially now when every day it's like Groundhog Day. We're living Groundhog Day when every day is the same. The tools of becoming present through the breath, through pausing, and just, connecting with a physical sense of oneself. All those tools that we learn in yoga are, I think, needed now more than ever. It's like we don't necessarily need to look anywhere else if we've been doing yoga and if we've been learning yoga as a spiritual practice, or a practice that's not just exercise. I think we just need to go back and use those tools.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's time to integrate what we've learned and what we've grabbed onto, and yoga is one of those, versus trying to keep learning or you're always learning, but I guess what I'm affirming and agreeing that if you're already in a yoga practice, or even if you just want to start one, using those tools during this time is very important. And I feel like it's a time of integration. Like, I'm going back through what I've learned in the last couple of years through my yoga teacher training and different yoga certifications I've gotten, and opening those books back up in those binders and saying, okay, what is it that, I need to soak in, or what do I want to look at, or what practice do I want to do? Like, I've been, my Light on Yoga book is back here, and it's like destroyed. I mean, it's really, talk about overuse, like, it's destroyed, but I found myself going through and opening the pages to something I've never tried before. And like, what does this feel like? And what does this look like? And so, yes, those tools are available to us to keep us. And I can feel like I haven't practiced in a couple of weeks, and I feel that, like, okay, it's time to move and just move that energy through. It's so much deeper than exercise. It's like moving energy through, and it's important for all of us because the planet's releasing a lot of energy, and so we are part of the conduits to help transmute energy out, but also to bring energy in to our planet as well. It's like really important. I want to invite, there's quite a few of you guys online. I want to invite you guys, if you want to share, if you have questions for Barrie, or if you want to share anything about your own renewal process, I'd love to hear it. And we'll check in with that. And I know this is kind of putting you on the spot, but I kind of had an idea while you were talking, is maybe it'd be nice if it's first thing in the morning for most of us. If you wanted to lead us and maybe how you were talking about how you open your practice and give space and things. And I thought maybe it'd be nice for you to give us a little renewal start to our day. What do you think?
Oh, well, the way I always start my practice is by lying on my back on the floor.
Okay.
On my mat. So I don't think I could do that right here where I'm at.
Okay.
But if you're watching and listening, you could certainly do it.
Yes.
So you can just lie down on your back with your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor. And I always start by taking a few really full exhalations and through the mouth, and just letting it go, and just letting my body release into the floor as if it was releasing down into the earth. That's where, so if you're sitting, you can do the same thing actually by just taking a few exhalations and releasing the energy of releasing your pelvis, feeling your buttock bones get heavy. And if you're holding tension in the legs and your thighs, so just release that. Just let your lower body drop down. Almost like as if you were growing roots beneath you down into the earth. So if you're lying on the floor, you can imagine that from the back of the body, right? So just releasing down. And from there, as you release down, so we were talking about lessons from nature. Everything in nature, that grows upward has roots in the earth. So from that rooted place, you can feel your spine really naturally. It doesn't have to be muscular or effortful at all. Just feeling your spine lengthen, and the back of your neck lengthen, and your face soften. And then feel the natural rhythm of your breathing. And soften your jaw, soften your face. So softening the features on your face. That, in yoga, I think one of the keys to renewal in yoga is recognizing that life tends to take us outside. It moves our energy outside. And so returning our energy and the energy of our senses in particular back inward it's what's called pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses. And that, the teaching in yoga is that when the senses rest back, they actually rest in a source place. That there's the source place inside that is never depleted. That's always full of energy and enthusiasm and newness. It's always new. So there is this place, and when we're able to soften the senses back, and that's why softening the jaw, soften behind the eyes, soften the nasal passages, the inner ears. As we do that, we start to bring our awareness back to that source place, and we can rest there. And when we rest there, that is really, I think, the most deeply renewing part of the practice. And from that place, you could ask yourself, you know, maybe when our conversation is done, like, what is it that the body needs, right? What is it that your mind needs? And just go from there. And like you said, I think it's a great idea. You know, going from there doesn't necessarily mean you just do whatever. I have personally found, like you mentioned, going back to light on yoga, I have personally found that there is a comfort in the form of the asanas that we've been practicing that we know. I mean, it's great to try new things and go back, but going back to what's familiar in a new way, it's always going to be different because we're always different.
Yeah.
So it's never going to be the same, but there is for me something comforting and stabilizing about going back to those familiar forms as a framework for inner connection. You know, that I don't have to think so much, right? I can just feel it. I can be it. And it's something, you know, downward facing dog's a pose that I know it's a form of, it's, you know, a way of put my body in a shape it knows. And there's something for me very supportive in that, just in that. So I think there's a place for free movement and just going with the flow and doing what you want. And again, everybody's a little bit different in this regard. And I also think there's something to, you know, there's a power in going back to those familiar forms that we might know.
That's beautiful. And so true. I took my first yoga classes. It would have been just about 20 years ago now. And at the time I was 100 pounds more than I am right now. Oh, my ears are ringing. So that's interesting all of a sudden while we're talking. But I took this gentle yoga class because that was about all I could handle physically at the time. And to this day, that particular asana, it was a lot of spine twisting on the floor. It just soothes the nervous system. And so when you talk about, it's just beautiful what you're talking about, those familiar forms, because it's so true. There's just a certain set of things, and it's like a 10-minute process. It's not very long, that to this day, like, God, sometimes that's all I need is to just move and twist my spine and just, you know, give myself a squeeze. And I think it's important to note what you said too about asking what your body needs. And that's so important. That mindfulness of the body exercise is so important, like putting your hands. And I think, you know, we want physical touch. There's some of us in the community that, I mean, I'm lucky. I have, you know, my husband and I have 4 children. So we're all, you know, still engaging and socializing. But, you know, there's people that I know that can't, right? That they live alone and they're doing their own thing. And so just remembering too, to touch, I think is important. Touch your skin, touch your body, like hold yourself. Like I think of, for some reason, you know, just bringing your knees to your chest and squeezing them, that posture just sticks in my head. Like just touch and squeeze and hold your space could be very renewing right now.
Yes. Yes. And I think you make a good point, which is, you know, we tend to, in our culture, we tend to want new things. We want new input. We want to try something new. I also think there's a lot of value in just using what you know works for you. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be long. But just recognizing that we don't necessarily need a lot of different things. Like if you know that lying on your back and drawing your knees into your chest, and that is, I didn't lead you guys through that, but that's something I do. And I just rock and roll on my back and I go back and forth and I have these balls that I roll over. And that's usually not all I do, but I always start there, and it creates a framework. Right? It's like the body knows, the mind knows, the nervous system knows that we're moving into practice. And so I think there is a lot of value in just using what you know, having it be simple, and having it be enough. And we don't necessarily need to always be looking for new things. I mean, it might be enjoyable and we can benefit from that. But I think if we're always looking for new things, then we miss a lot of potential in in going deeper in what we already know. It's like, I remember a story where a student went to a master and he said, how can I go deep in yoga? And the master said, think of digging wells. If you want to reach water, if you just dig a lot of shallow wells, all you're going to end up with is holes in the ground, right? You have to dig one well deep. So, if we are interested in using yoga as a path of personal development and personal growth and insight and self-discovery, I think the framework of the practices that we know and that we're familiar with, and there's a momentum and an energy that builds up, I think, over time when we go back again and again and again, and we learn to, I think, dig the well of our own experience deeper. Right. And that's certainly where the inquiry comes in. But it's also, I think, very renewing because it makes us self-reliant, makes us independent. We know, that again, we have ways to touch that wellspring of renewal. Right. So and there's so many pathways to it. So whatever works for us, if we keep going there, the well of our experience gets deeper.
I love that. And it makes me think of, Iyengar talking about Tadasana, which is just standing up, is our peak pose, like going back to standing up, and what does that feel like to just stand, and what's changed? I think it's pretty amazing to do something simple, a simple thing, sitting, standing, downward dog to me isn't very simple, actually. I mean, really, it's not. So I think going to something simple and saying, okay, where are my shoulders today? Where, like I naturally hunch, and I've really practiced where everything I'm doing is about getting upright and untwisting myself, my fascia and my vertebrae. And so there's something really beautiful, that just affirms that well story of just going back to the same thing over and over again and seeing the change, because that gives empowerment. I think I've felt empowerment this year where it's like, when I go into my practice and things have changed and it's like, wow, and I actually did a nerdy thing. Like I had my husband take pictures of like me in certain poses, and I'm like noticing the change.
Yeah.
And it's pretty radical if you're really focused on less on a bunch of different things and more on, everything you do is about shifting one thing. It makes a huge difference, I think. And so I love what you're saying.
And you brought up a really great point about just as we go through life, being aware of our posture, like right now, how close are your shoulders toward your ears, right? Is your spine lengthening, right? Is your jaw relaxed? Like all those, and because all of us many of us are at the computer a lot these days. So just being aware of our posture when we're sitting, that can make a huge difference. And what you were saying about Tadasana, I thought there's a couple ways we can look at that, because, as you know, Mr. Hager has also said that Shavasana is the hardest pose, right? That's the resting pose. So why is it the hardest? It's because of our mind, right? Because it's about the mind becoming still. So that's really hard. So I think that we can see, going deeper into a simple, familiar form as a challenge, right? Like standing in Tadasana and actually penetrating the depth of Tadasana is an advanced practice. That's why I always say, someone that's a yogi and knows how to approach practice as a student and as as a practice of inquiry, you know, you can go deep in any posture, right? So, but that's actually an advanced practice, right? So that's a challenge that someone like you, who's been practicing for a long time, you know that challenge, and you like that challenge, and you get the benefits of that challenge. Also, though, I think right now, because we're being challenged in so many ways outside, I think there's a way that we want to take hold of the simple things that nurture us and have that be enough. Have that actually recognize how those simple things are serving us, and extract more out of just a few minutes of conscious breathing or feeling your body relaxed, you know, kind of, we can use the simple things as we can use the simple things as a challenge, but we can also use the simple things as enough, right? If we're in a house with young children and we don't have time to practice, you know, how do we make just the way we stand when we're preparing dinner, an asana? You know, how do we bring presence through our breath while we're doing the tasks that we need to be doing, you know? So I think there's a way we can expand our ideas of what practice is also right now. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I think you could when you're present in those moments, I'm just thinking like, oh, you could use that for renewal as well, you know, breathing while you're cooking dinner, and with the intention of renewal, you know, brings you into a completely different space when you sit down for dinner, where you can be present.
Definitely. And there's a lot of ways to access that, but I work a lot with just pauses. We all have pauses in our day, you know, moving from one activity to the next. You know, we're going to finish this call, and then we're going to both go on to something else in that transition. How can I come back to my breathing is a big one for me, just being aware of my natural breath. The pauses in our day can be little mini places where we renew ourselves. Like you said, preparing dinner for our families. How do we make that a practice of renewal? Well, mindfulness, you know, gives us so many ways to think about that. Thinking about the gratitude for having food to eat, gratitude for everyone who contributed to us having food to eat. You know, just expanding, becoming present in the pause, and expanding our awareness, I think, are two ways to really bring that spirit of renewal into our day.
I love it. You said something that's a great segue into a question I had. You were talking about transition. And I was thinking the other day, I have a weird little, you know, empathic quirk of mine, in which the wind kind of tells me when the seasons are going to change. And I went for a hike over the weekend with my husband, and the wind, like, I just knew the seasons are going to change. And it sounds a little silly because it's July, but it's always the transition is starting, I feel. And then you think about, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, you know, there's back to school, and whatever that's going to look like is really only, I mean, it's 3 or 4 weeks away from now, and we're going into fall. And so how do you transition seasons? And the second part to that question is, what does renewal look like as you transition? Because I'm definitely somebody who lives in the transitions. I love the seasonal transitions versus being a certain season. I mean, fall and winter, I love very much, because I'm the kappa energy of summer is really hard for me. So I'm actually very sluggish in the summer, where some people are like alive. That is not me. But I'm just curious, you know, what are some of your practices for transitioning seasons, and how do you create that restore and renew as you shift? Because we're really stepping into that transition time in the next few weeks, I think.
Yeah, good. I think that's a great question. Well, I think what we've been saying is honoring your energy and honoring where you're at on any given day is one thing, and just listening to what your body needs, and the signals that it sends you. And we all have ways of, you know, of connecting to that. And I think about it in terms of the koshas, you know, the 5 layers of who we are in the yogic tradition: the body, breath, mind, intellect, and heart, or spirit or deepest self. And I try to have practices that address all those layers, because I feel like, immunity and being strong, because the transition is where the weakness comes out, right? Like for many people, like when two things are joined together, if there's a weak point, it's in that joint.
Yeah.
Right. So I always find that the transition between seasons are really important times to perhaps rest more, to just make sure, kind of check in with myself that I'm doing things on the body level, the physical level, the pranic level, the mental level, which for me is also like you writing and journaling and having that time in solitude to, work with my mind and emotions. And for me, it's always a lot about letting go also, because like I love summer. And I was just thinking that like in a few weeks, like, August is going to get busier and school starts and blah, blah, and so there's a little bit of mourning for me in that, because I live in Canada where summer is like this, it's this precious time and it's gone. And then we have this winter. Yeah.
Probably where I need to be for summer, because it's hot here.
Yeah. And so we just, soak it up. And so there, so just honoring that. Not everybody has that probably, but just recognizing that. So, it's using it. It's in some ways things don't change because it's still using the practices, but I think there's a sensitivity that's needed. I always loved the season of late summer. Right. In the Chinese system, there's 5 seasons in that late summer, which is that transition time that we're going to be going into soon. I love late summer. For me, it's I always love the fall too. So I love being able to, move from the abundance and the fullness of July into, letting go and going into the fall season. So
I love that. Well, I don't know if it's all the years, because I was in fashion for 20 years, yikes. And my spiritual work was my side gig for that time. But I always loved fall. And I don't know if it's from all the years in fashion, because fall is like the best season of the year, but I think I loved it before then too. But yeah, I'm definitely a fall into winter person. So for me, that late fall is actually my favorite time, when it's really crisp out and really cool. That speaks to the Vata in me. I mean, it really does, because I love that, like, crispy. It's starting to get cold. You can put on some layers. But again, I just love transition, and I think we're headed into it, actually. I mean, I just really feel that coming. And so when you talk about the late summer, I'm gonna have to look that up, because I haven't heard of the 5 seasons that you're mentioning. So that's
it's a transitional season. And I always, like you, I have felt that fall, we were talking about beginning again and new beginnings. For me, fall always felt like that, because it's school, you have your new school supplies and you're starting again. But, the truth is we can always begin again. And for me, that's one of the most powerful renewal practices. But for sure, there is that feeling in the fall. And I'm from a Jewish family, so the Jewish New Year is in September. So it definitely felt for me, growing up, that fall was a new beginning.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. Oh, Barrie, I just love you so much. I mean, you really just bring so much, and I hope we do this many times over. I want to take some time for you to share how everyone can connect with you, what's available, and where can they get your book and those kinds of things, because I want to make sure. I know, for me, I was like, oh, how do I get connected? And I'm just loving the book. And so I wanted to just give you some space to kind of share what you have going on right now and what's available and accessible to everyone who's watching and listening.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. It's called Evolving Your Yoga: 10 Principles for Enlightened Practice. And I have a weekly blog that you can sign up for. My site is my name, barrierisman.com. I also have some new things coming up in the next few weeks. So one will be weekly classes with me, which are asana classes, alignment-based asana classes, but also with a teaching talk to precede them. So when I teach asana, it's never just the physical practice, but it's always within the bigger context of how the practice can serve us in our lives, much like we've been speaking about today. So my classes always begin with a little talk, and then they go into the asana practice, and then some reflection questions at the end. So it's really an integrated practice, and that'll be coming up in the next few weeks. Those will be available as a standalone subscription on my site. I work a lot with yoga teachers to help them go deeper into their own practice, and also to start to integrate the wisdom teachings of yoga into what they do, because I think now is a time when we're all looking for meaning. We're all really needing to connect to the bigger purpose of our lives in an uplifting way. And so I'm going to be giving a course in the fall to help yoga teachers learn how to bring the philosophy of yoga into their classes in ways that feel down to earth, relevant, right? That it's not just reading an inspirational quote, but really being able to connect to it in one's own experience and share that in a way that makes sense in the context of the student. So that's another aspect of what I'm doing now. And then the other piece is that I'm going to be offering in the fall a series of webinars for yoga teachers to go back to their true north, go back to reset. The yoga world, like many other industries, is in a hole. There's so much unknown. There's so many questions about the form that yoga teaching is going to take. But for me, there's no question that yoga is needed now more than ever. So I really want to support teachers in kind of resetting after what we've been through over the past few months, and really getting back to your dharma and your purpose as a teacher, your why, and using that as a way to direct what we do going forward. Because I think now in every part of our lives, it's so easy to look out, and there's so much noise out there, and it's really easy to get distracted. And my work has always been to help continuing students and teachers to go back to their own connection with their practice so that it can serve them in their lives and serve their students. So those are the focuses of what I'll be doing in the next few months.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. And we'll get all of the links in our show notes. So you guys, whether you're watching or listening, you'll get all this information. I have definitely creeped on all your stuff, and I love it so much. So, and working through the book, I'm really excited about this webinar series. I think that would be something good even for me to do, because, I teach online also, and it's more spiritual focused than, and alignment focused. And so getting those fresh, I think it's really valuable to always be a student. It just really is. Like, I can't say it enough. It's always valuable to go dig in and really look at things in a different way, because it just changes you in this really beautiful way. I just think it's so important. So I'm excited about all these things you have to offer.
Yeah, thanks. And so the best way, if you want to know about all those things, is to sign up for my blog. I'm also on Facebook, Barrie Risman Yoga, so I'm pretty easy to find. And
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I feel better.
Good.
I feel better after we talk.
All right.
I know. And thank you to everybody who's watching. Somebody just wrote, I've just finished work and I'm so glad I caught this live. So,
oh, good.
Yes. Thank you guys who are watching live. And if you're listening later, thank you as well. And you guys can continue to share your comments and questions. And I already think that I'll talk to you about it, Barrie, but I already think we've been doing a monthly feature and reading someone's book and really connecting in with them. And I feel like maybe September is a good month for you to do that. So I'll talk to you about that, because I think it'd be fun for us as a community to really dive in. So Julie Hoyle is our focus this month. And just really, again, it's about integration. I feel like part of Buddhist Biohacker is getting the resources out there. And so we kind of have bombarded everyone with content. We'll continue to do that. But I think there's real value to stepping back each month and saying, how do we really integrate the teachings that we're receiving here? Because it's important to do that, because it's easy to feel it and then kind of keep going. And so again, it's that checking back in. So I think that'd be awesome. So
great. I love that.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's been watching. And don't worry, Barrie will be back, I'm sure. And enjoy the rest of your summer for the last.
Yes, you too. You too. And enjoy the transition into fall.
Yes, I will. I will. And we'll keep in touch. And thank you, everybody. And I will see you guys. I'm actually back in an hour with Katie Sinnott. We're actually talking about galactics at 11 o'clock. So that'll be a fun conversation too. So thank you so much, Barrie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.